Have you ever played a game that you absolutely adored, but where the stakes were, well, fairly low? Diplomats and attaches, the fallen and the corrupting, ladies and gentlemen, gamers and storytellers. Hit like and subscribe, keep up with us in the comments and all that jazz as we delve into the intrigue and mystery of politics in role-playing. Perhaps you felt the weight of the world was on your shoulders and that one quest item was all that mattered. Doesn't matter upon whom you tread and to whom you lie, as long as you recover that artifact and save the day, as long as you line your pockets, or whatever other objective your party or your GM has chosen for you. If you've never played or run a game where twisting the knife in the back of a powerful NPC, or double-crossing allegiances, or taking the other fork in that road has something other than a mere fight as consequence, then, well, I feel like maybe now is the time to embrace intrigue in your next role-playing campaign, either as a GM or as a player. I know what you're thinking. Politics can be really boring, and certainly that can be the case, no matter your social beliefs. When you're watching video footage of any government really going through the motions, it can be uneventful. If you're not really engaged and you don't really care about that subject matter, it's just dull. Certainly not the same as running into a room in a dungeon, slicing through some generic bad guys, grabbing some treasure. It just doesn't have that same level of fun and abandon, does it? Certainly most of us enjoy that sort of game. Definitely got a place in my heart. You've seen we play a lot of things like Dungeon Crawl Classics on our channel. That's why we're all here a lot of the time. But have you ever wondered why you're on that quest? For what purpose does that NPC need the overbearing staff of Margarine Explosion or the Scroll of Infinite Carpeting? The real world is full of shades of grey, where people genuinely have a differing opinion, and their reasons for sharing beliefs, even within that group, even within their faction, can vary significantly between individuals and their own personal agendas. Politics under the surface help to make the world feel real and alive, and certainly within a political game that's very much the case. The tasks that you're asked to perform could have incredible moral dilemmas. They can impact the very society that you call home. Your party may have to make careful, considered choices that will shape the world that you live in, not only on a microscopic level, not just the inventory of a shop or the rescue of a distant loved one, but perhaps the livelihood of a town or the survival of an entire people. Often there are unforeseen circumstances and unforeseen consequences and plot twists that will make your players gasp, especially if they've not uncovered that until months after they made that fateful decision. As your characters become involved in these situations and make decisions based on their own beliefs, not your personal beliefs, hopefully, they'll learn to live with the cause and effect, and at great expense your characters will develop. Not just in terms of attribute points and spell lists and what you can do, that attacking types and all your special moves, not just that, but the morality of your characters, their attitudes, their life experiences. In a political game, players often begin to realize that the world isn't just about how hard you can hit something. It's also about whether you should. It's about how we deal with confrontation and with each other, even within the group, outside of those combat situations. Themes in political RPGs tend to be realistic despite those fanciful settings, and the dynamic storytelling and role-playing that is required to deal with those situations helps to bring the game to life. Often results in extremely rich situations that have a huge personal impact away from the table. Are you curious to know a little bit more? I hope you are. I really love this sort of stuff, and so hopefully that's coming through. Let me know in the comments how you feel as we go through this, but I'd love to just take a little bit of a look at 3 of my favourite role-playing games that exhibit politics and intrigue. No doubt if you've been around for a while and if you've been playing these sorts of games previously, then you'll have played or heard of at least one of these. They're all great in very different ways, so let's dive in and have a look at just a couple. We can't really talk about politics in role-playing games without talking about Vampire the Masquerade. And in fact, I will show you, this is my copy. I do have newer versions as well, but this right here is my copy of the second edition of Vampire. It's the first game I got into. Most of you, I think, know that. And it's got a special place in my heart, and I've not played it for a very long time. I've got 5th edition on the shelf back there, but doesn't matter. I think a lot of people who haven't played Vampire, or who have played maybe an adulterated version of Vampire the Masquerade, might have the opinion that it's all about being goth superheroes. One-shots can certainly feel that way. Vampire is one of the oldest games that I can think of that is in active play right now, that really embraces politics at its very core, and where you can't escape it. It's been going for about 30 years, so if you really wanted to go all the way back to the beginning, you're going to have a hard time if you've not been playing it for up until this point. The reality is that 5th edition is good fun, and you can certainly start there. There's a bunch of stuff that's been put out in that edition, and it's very accessible, so you shouldn't feel too overwhelmed to just pick up the core book, maybe a couple of the expansions, and maybe one of the scenario campaign books, and just diving in. It's really great, and certainly you don't need 30 years of reading in order to catch up and play the game. The Masquerade itself is the governing principle of kindred vampiric society, and basically the idea is that we want to conceal the supernatural from those that have not yet been embraced into the world of darkness, so those who aren't vampires or otherwise evolved, or werewolves or mages or whatnot. We don't tell them that we exist. That's how we're still here. However, there are actually a number of factions that are battling within Vampire the Masquerade. You have the Camarilla. Now think of them as old money. So they are the institution, if you like. They are the society as far as they're concerned. And if you want to stay in the society, and if you want to be somebody, they want to make sure that you do what they say, you act the way they want you to act, and as a result of doing those things, you will stay in society, in the only society that matters as far as they're concerned. There are quite a few people who disagree with that, who disagree even with the notion that vampires should be hidden. Probably the best way to give an analogy of that is if you think about the Marvel superheroes, the X-Men. They are the institution for doing the right thing, and they're not really a great analogy for the Camarilla, but that's your establishment there. Then you have Magneto's lot. They think they are superior. Mutants shouldn't be in hiding. Mutants are the future. They should be in control of the world. And Sabbat is a bit like that. So basically, they feel that vampires, they are the supreme beings. So you have a natural juxtaposition there, and that's an ongoing conflict. You actually then also have anarchs. They're anarchists. They actually think that both of these groups of people just stop messing around. It doesn't really matter. The anarchs are there to really provide a really interesting counterpoint against both of those arguments. You have to choose your battles, and particularly if your party or individuals of your party group are not in one of those societies and others are, then you have a tension within your party. But even if you're all Sabbat or you're all Camarilla, actually, there's always going to be shades of grey. The Camarilla certainly have their problems, and the Sabbat are probably right in many ways. Likewise, the Sabbat, maybe they're taking things a bit too far. Doesn't really end there, though, because on top of that, we've got the challenge that not everyone is in the same social group there either. You actually have a bunch of clans. The clans represent different bloodlines, if you like, and therefore different abilities. So, for example, you have the Ventru, they're very aristocratic. You have the Malkavians, who are prone to madness, and they're very chaotic. You have the Gangrel, who are maybe a little bit more related to the werewolves. They tend to be more bestial in nature. So you have this as well. And all these different clans have different beliefs amongst themselves, each other. So there's so much that you can delve into in Vampire. It's not just goth superheroes. It can be, but that's not what makes Vampire the Masquerade great. Your actions could genuinely change the world state, destroy your clan standing, lead to final death or to true immortality. Moving on. The Expanse. First of all, I've got to say, if you've not read the Expanse books, starting with, I think, Leviathan Wakes is the first one. Let me know in the comments if I messed that up. Or if you've not watched a TV show, then especially if you're the GM, if you're going to run the game, definitely recommend that you check those out. I haven't made it all the way through the books. I've made a fair amount of headway, and certainly the TV show does quite a lot of justice, at least to the earlier books. And the TV show itself is brilliant as well. One of the best sci-fi shows of the last sort of 10, 15 years. And the role-playing game, I promise I know what I'm talking about. The role-playing game is based on the books. Huge amounts of similarity to the TV show. Obviously, there's quite a lot in common, but they do deviate. They are slightly different. A bit like Game of Thrones, there's differences, but not quite that dramatic. It's an amazing world. So, well, solar system. At its core, of course, it's a space game. Your party probably have a spaceship, or they're trying to get a spaceship. And ideally, you'll fly from place to place doing what people in space do. It's a very industrial setting. They try and keep it fairly low key, so yes, there's technology, but it's relatively gritty, somewhat realistic feeling science fiction. But there's a lot to it. Humanity has colonized the solar system. There are those of us that live on Earth, but we also have habitation on Mars, and we both colonize and mine the asteroid belt. So that actually leads to three primary factions. You've got the Earthers, the Martians, and the Belters. And each of these factions have really strong, solid reasons to kind of fear or hate, distrust each other. We're trying to bring them together, but it's really hard. In a nutshell, Earthers are very proud of home. They're very patriotic, and they feel that Earth is the birthplace that should be protected at all costs. Martians, obviously they left Earth, they went to Mars for various reasons, and as a result of being somewhere else and being forced to, not necessarily forced to, but learning to live in this hostile, different landscape, technology has really kind of raced ahead. Martian technology is the best technology there is, and they're very proud of that. They also feel that Earth really doesn't have a clue what's going on, and Earth doesn't treat them fairly, and Martians are better. Basically, that's their, in a nutshell, that's their belief system. It's there's more to it, of course there is, but that probably gives you an idea. You know, you have this Earth versus Mars thing going on all the time. Then you have the Belters. Belters are really interesting. They're a deeply industrial and hard-working society. They are your blue-collar workers. They're out in the asteroids. They are mining. They've been born, raised in this low-gravity environment. They really struggle. Places like Earth, where the gravity is much stronger. And because that society has evolved over quite a long time, they have their own dialect, which is very different. It's like a Creole, basically, Martian Creole. They feel really exploited, undervalued, and angry. Now, depending on the makeup of your party, how your GM's running the game, you could be called upon to act on behalf of, or even hail from, any of those factions. Your crew might be requested to broker peace or war within the solar system. There's that ever-present threat of conflict, and the balance of power is on a knife edge. Ethical dilemmas are rampant, and as we put to test, made to question your own beliefs, how you feel about things. But I've got to say, there's a spoiler alert right here. Things will become even more heated if and when discoveries of an alien origin are made. There's more to this setting than just what's here within our solar system. And at that point, the question is, who can you trust and who can you turn to? I think the Expanse is awesome, and I really want to dig properly into it. I haven't run it yet, but it's been on my list for a while. The book's gorgeous. It follows the age system, which is great, and it's definitely worth checking out. If you fancy some sci-fi and you want some deep politics in there, Coriolis, I'd say, is also one that's worth looking at, but I can't just love on Free League all the time. And speaking of Free League, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that the third game on this list is Symbaroum. Ah, Symbaroum. Those of you who've been around for a while on this channel know how I feel about this game. On the surface, it's a dark forest fantasy game about treasure hunters who want to go into the forest, and the kind of pushback against doing that. Don't go into the forest, it's not for you. In reality, there are human groups consisting of, well, there's a collection of tribes, collectively known as barbarians. but that's barbarians in the sense of they are less cultured than the rest of us. So it's really a disparaging term, not like the kind of idea of Viking barbarians. And those barbarians were present in the lands where the game is set before the Ambrian peoples, the other kind of major human faction, if you like, marched forth from the south and laid claim around 21 years ago. Very few of the clans actually really see eye to eye, although they do share some common beliefs. They believe that nature is important and we shouldn't generally kind of squander that resource. We should respect the land where we live. We should stay out of the woods for reasons that we won't go into. They won't go into. The forest is not for us, but it's more for us than it is for the Ambrians. To most barbarians, the Ambrians are barbaric hordes, really, ironically, that came forth and slew their families, took their land, that sort of thing. The Ambrians, on the other hand, are mostly, but not entirely, fairly noble. You have a spread of financial stabilities, and there are various different kind of levels to the society of Ambrian people. But compared to the barbarians, they are of course all of better standing. They're relatively rich. They made their way through the mountains some 20 years ago after a horrible war where a bunch of corrupt magicians basically waged a kind of magical conflict and razed the ground, so it's all just unlivable now. So they went north where apparently there was this promised land, and that's where we've ended up. They created settlements. They took the settlements that were already there and made them their own. They built new cities and towns, and they seized much at the great cost of the indigenous people, the barbarians that I mentioned earlier on. There are other societies as well. You have the old, wise and vicious elves of the forest. They're not your Tolkien elves. They are very otherworldly. They're dwarves and goblins and other creatures. Of course, also you have the animals of the forest. There's a rumour of an Iron Pact, this treaty which stated that no humans will enter the forest, and in return, no humans will be killed for doing so. The Iron Pact was such a long time ago that basically no one believes that it even exists. Those that do believe it exists, very few of them really remember why. It's just a thing. And as for the forest itself, well, there are all these wonderful old ruins. It has great riches, but at the cost of corruption and despair. It doesn't really end there. The barbarian clans are always fighting amongst themselves. They disagree with each other. There are a number of different clans. On top of that, the Ambrians themselves also have many different factions. You have the church with its one true god, except that there's actually multiple factions within the church. You have those who are either for or against the monarchy. You have the magic users. You have the mages. You've got the Theurgs, the holy warriors of the church. You have the witches, the barbarian witches, and they all see magic in very different ways. And there's disagreements over whether it's something that should be studied, if it's something that should be called forth from the sun god Praeos, and those who feel that it is squandering nature to overuse this wonderful power from the land, the barbarians, the witches. So none of these societies, these factions really tend to believe each other, and they don't tend to see eye to eye. Your party will probably be required to broker peace and to negotiate between multiple factions, never knowing which is the right decision and maybe not finding out for a long time afterwards, particularly if you're going to play the Throne of Thorns campaign. There's so much grey. It was beautiful. I would recommend, though, if you're going to run Symbaroum, if you don't already know this, I would strongly suggest that all of the players are Ambrian, because there's quite a lot of challenge in getting any other races to empathise with the stories within Throne of Thorns. So just a little bit of a Game Master tip there. Overall, though, what's really interesting is that everyone seems to want to get into Davokar, particularly the Ambrians, which is really important for this for the campaign, and no one seems to really have considered why you should stay out of the forest. Why is it corrupted? And more importantly, was Davokar planted for a reason? So yeah, obviously I'm biased, but these are three fantastic games, and definitely I would have been checking them out. So in wrapping up, really hope that's given you a bit of an idea of why I love political games so much and what they can bring to the table. The worlds are so intricate, and weaving stories, whether they're pre-published or they're your original creations of your game master. Those stories, if they take the actions of your players and pull them into focus with intrigue and the juxtaposition of personal and social dilemmas, they can be so fun. They can be so rich, and the rewards as a player and as a GM can be really deep. I'm a huge fan of completion of the circle, if you like. So what do you think? What are your thoughts on this sort of game? Have you played a lot of political games? What have I missed? I'm sure that there are a bunch of games that you feel are better suited to this list than the 3 that I've chosen today. Let me know in the comments. I hope you have enjoyed this. Let me know which other games I should try and get to my table or try and play if I get the opportunity, either as a one-shot or in a campaign. And regardless of whether you think political games and games full of social and diplomatic intrigue are for you, I really hope that you have enjoyed the show. Please let me know by coercing that like button, manipulating the subscribe button, and of course joining us over on Discord or supporting us on Patreon as we delve into the finer points of Order. Until next time, I hope your dice rolls are way better than mine. Thank you very much for joining.